Hello, good afternoon, good morning, depending on where you are. My name is Shaun Minton, and in just a couple of minutes, we're going to start a presentation called Doppler Made Easy. It's some of the highlights of our Doppler Flow Meter 6.1. We're going to give it a minute or two to let any late entries enter into the webinar, and then we'll start here in approximately 1 minute. For those that are currently on the line, we'll take questions at the end of the webinar. You can either do that through the Q&A button or the chat button. What I'll do once the webinar is complete, and it should probably take about 20 minutes or so, I'll dig into the chat and Q&A questions and answer those questions as best I can. Everybody who is watching and viewing at this point, you're all on mute, so we can't hear you anyway. So if you do have a question, put it in that chat or Q&A section, and we'll dig those up at the end of the presentation itself. And we'll give it just maybe another 30 seconds or so. I've got 2 minutes after the hour, so I'll give it another 30 seconds. See if any other folks want to jump on board, and then we'll take it from there. So we do have a couple of new folks that have entered the room. I'll make this announcement one more time, and then we'll get into the presentation. The presentation itself should take between 15 and 20 minutes, leaving us plenty of time for questions at the end. If you do have a question, you can either click on that chat button or the Q&A button. I'll check them both at the end of the presentation, and then I will address those questions as they come up. I would imagine I'll start with the chat button, answer all the questions in there, and then I'll go over to the Q&A button and we can take the remaining questions from there. So again, good morning, good afternoon, everybody, and thanks for attending this presentation. My name is Shaun Minton. I'm the sales manager for the Americas for Pulsar Measurement, and we're going to spend the next few minutes talking about one of the solutions that I think really makes Pulsar Measurement unique, and that is our Doppler meter. So we're going to talk a little bit about the Doppler, how to set it up, how quick and easy it is to use. And actually, I'm going to be honest with you, it's actually kind of fun to use too. So we'll talk about some of the fun aspects as well. In terms of my background, I've been a territory manager for quite some time now. The last 5 years, I've been with Pulsar Measurement, also formerly known as Grayline Instruments. I also spent a couple of years as a territory manager with Krona Incorporated, which is a large German company that is known for flow as well. And then the last 3 or 4 months, I have been the sales manager of the Americas for Pulsar Measurement, which means I'm responsible for sales in Canada, North America, South America, and Central America. But before that, I spent a lot of time as a manufacturer's rep as well. I've got over 20 minutes in the water quality instrumentation business. So I've been doing this for a long time, been married for a long time, and I also have a 10-year-old son. So in terms of personal things about me, those are the things I want you to know. There are other things I probably don't want you to know. So when we're talking about Pulsar Measurement and some of the things that we're known for, I think when people look at our equipment versus equipment from some of our competitors, these are 5 or 6 of the things that really stand out in my mind, that people look at us and say, well, you're different because. I am assuming that most of you know how to read. I'm not big into reading line by line on a PowerPoint. That gets fairly monotonous, but what I will do is occasionally will highlight a sentence or two that I think is important. I think on the slide that we're showing you right now, these are all important, but I think the most important thing is our devices, especially the Doppler, are so easy to set up. With the Doppler Flow Meter, once you kind of get the hang of it, you can set this up on any full pipe with suspended solids in about 5 minutes. It's really that simple. There's only a few key settings that you need to know, and then just let the device work its magic. That's the really great thing about it. Another nice thing about us is our lead times. In these times of supply chain issues and things like that, you may be talking to manufacturers and they're saying, we're 6 to 8 weeks out. we're 8 to 10 weeks out. You know, we're weeks and weeks out. And what we do with Pulsar measurement is right now, we're generally around 3 to 5 days in terms of a lead time. When things get kind of hectic, it can be a week or two, but you know, you'll never, for the most part, hear from us, oh yeah, that's going to be 6 to 8 weeks. And that's what I love about this company is we're very responsive. We'll get equipment to you as quickly as possible. If it is I have to have this thing tomorrow, 9 times out of 10, we can do that as well. And I'm not sure that any of our competitors can say that, but Pulsar measurement certainly can. So let's talk about Doppler and the technology. I'm not going to spend a bunch of time on this, but I want to talk about the technology. You know, what is Doppler? How does Doppler work? I want to talk about that for just a couple of minutes and then kind of get into the ease of use by showing you some of the menu setups and some of the items that you need to know before kind of kicking into using the unit itself. One of the things that I can tell you about Pulsar measurement and Doppler is there is no company on the planet that does a better job with Doppler than Pulsar measurement. We've been doing it for 30 plus years. It's really, when we were a standalone gray line instruments, it was the bread and butter of everything we did. Very few competitors had it, and those that did not do it as well as we did. In fact, I have gone online and used Google, Bing, whatever search engine you want to use. If you type in portable Doppler flow meter, to my knowledge, unless there's a secret company out there, there's maybe 1 or 2 companies that I can think of that even offer a portable solution. So we have, of course, a permanent solution that has a control box, but then if you want to go out in the field or you want to spot check existing units, we have a nice handheld portable unit as well. Nobody else has that, and nobody does it as well as we do. So when you think about Doppler, full pipe, dirty fluid, and when I say dirty fluid, I mean it's got to have some particulate matter in there. It's got to have bubbles. It's got to have sand. It's got to have silt. We can handle thick, gooey, sticky stuff, and we could just handle silt and sediment as well. But you have to have a minimum of about 5 to 10% suspended solids in that liquid in order for the Doppler to work. So how does Doppler work? It's actually pretty cool. And the concept of Doppler has been around since the 1870s. So this isn't some new technology that's only been discovered in the last decade or two. This is something that people have actually known about for centuries. So if you look at that little animation there, what you see is basically a large Doppler sensor. It's not that big in real life, but you see a Doppler sensor shooting a signal through a pipe and then bouncing off the particulate matter inside that pipe. So what it's doing is it's sending out a known frequency of 640 kilohertz, bouncing off all of those things that are moving, and then sending a different frequency back to the receiving sensor. And that is known as a Doppler shift. And if we know that frequency shift, we can then turn that into flow. Again, this isn't some magic from the last couple of years. This is something that a gentleman by the name of Doppler, you guessed it, created hundreds of years ago. So it's nothing new. It's been around forever. Although the companies that have perfected this technology are very far and few in between, we happen to be one of them. So that's how Doppler works in a nutshell. Obviously, there's a lot more magic going on behind it than that, because when you think about what's happening in a pipe and you think about that particulate matter, stuff in the middle of the pipe is generally flowing a little bit more slowly than stuff that's maybe sticking to the outside of that pipe. When I say outside of the pipe, I mean the inner wall, but the outside of that inner wall. So this technology has to take all those different speeds into account and then come up with the velocity and then come up with the flow. It's actually really cool the way it's done, and yet fairly simple at the same time. So we've got a couple of different flavors when it comes to the Doppler. The Doppler that you see in the upper right-hand corner, that's what we would consider our permanent setup, where you've got a control box, cable, and then you've got the Doppler sensor itself. And then that bottom one, again, I think this is what makes us really unique. That bottom right is our portable Doppler flow meter. It is fantastic, uses the exact same sensor, uses the exact same technology, but allows you to move from pipe to pipe and check out flow readings in places where maybe you never before thought you would be able to do that. These are extremely easy to install. We have a very unique 5-button system. What's really neat about our different technologies is with our 5-button system, you can move from a Doppler to a transit time to an area velocity meter. You can do all those things. And in many cases, those buttons will do the exact same thing on each of those individual solutions. And I'll show you that in just a couple of minutes. But in terms of the fear factor, there's no alphanumeric keyboard. There's no full keyboard. There's not a lot of buttons on there that you don't need anyway. What do you need from a Doppler flow meter? You need to know the flow. So we give you very simple buttons, very simple setups, very simple settings that allow you to go in, make the changes that need to be changed. But ultimately, hey, I just need to know the flow here. So that's what makes us unique. And that's what I really love about our Doppler flow meter. The other really cool thing about the Doppler flow meter, and again, I worked for a company that sold millions of dollars worth of magnetic flow meters. The great thing about the Doppler is it does not care what the size of your pipe is. We use the same sensor, whether you're using a 2-inch pipe or a 70-inch pipe. So think about the process of doing an inline system. Again, maybe a magnetic flow meter. You have to cut that pipe. You have to bring in the meter. You have to bring in a lot of people from your company or from your water district, whatever it is, to set that thing up, to get it in place, to flange it, to do all those things. It can take a day. It can take days. With our system, again, you're not cutting into a pipe. You're simply putting this on the outside of the pipe. You can have a reading within 5 minutes. This can be done by a single person. That's really, really powerful stuff. In terms of the pipe itself, we want a solid pipe. We want carbon steel. We want PVC. We want copper. Doppler doesn't necessarily do well with, say, a cement pipe. We can do a cement lined pipe, and we can do a lined pipe as long as we know that it's in there, so that we can go into the settings and we can account for that. But any type of a pipe that might have pockets of air like cement, that's not necessarily a good setup for a Doppler. So let's talk a little bit, I'm bragging about, hey, our setup is so easy. Let's take a look at the setup, and I will show you with a couple of screenshots how easy it is to set up. So when you first power up the device, the first thing you see is our homepage, and you're going to see some basic information. On this slide, it's we've just turned it on, and we don't necessarily have it hooked onto a pipe yet. But what you're going to see in the upper left-hand corner, you're going to see some icons that tell you, hey, I'm logging, or I'm not logging, or hey, you've got a USB stick in and you're downloading data that you've already logged. In the upper right, that's just your units of measurement. So US gallons per minute, liters per minute, barrels, however you want to set that up. And that big 000, that's your flow, because we know that's the most important thing when you're looking at that screen. We can totalize, and we have relays as well. And so if you have relays set up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, whatever it may be, those relays would be highlighted depending on how many that you have set up. So that's your home screen. Remember, I told you this is a 5-button system. So you have an up, you have a left, you have a right, you have a down, and then in the middle, you've got what is a check mark, which is something that kind of gets you back to the home page. So if you hit the up arrow button on either the portable unit or the permanent unit, you're going to see logging information. It's going to tell you, am I logging? How much room do I have left on the logging? And is my sensor good? So the one thing that I want to warn you about sensor good is that doesn't necessarily mean that the sensor is communicating necessarily with the control box in the right manner. And what I mean by that is if you look at the instructions right below that, it may say that the sensor is good, but you still have to check the sensor integrity with the voltage meter if you find that you're having some difficulty. Don't necessarily rely on sensor good to let you know that everything is peachy, because sensor good does not always necessarily mean what you think it would mean in terms of, oh, okay, everything's good within the sensor. So continuing with the up button here, and actually I think this is actually the down button, so I may have got my arrows mixed up. Yeah, this is actually down button. So see that bright green up arrow on the left hand side? Please ignore that and assume that we have set this as the down arrow. When you hit the down arrow, you're going to get your status, you're going to get your velocity, you're going to get your flow, you're going to get your signal strength and your signal cutoff. Signal strength is important, and it can be a kind of a tricky thing. Most people would think, oh, well, signal strength has to be 100%, right? You want to make sure that that signal is super strong. Well, remember, with a Doppler device, we could be looking at sludge or slurry or something really thick. So you don't necessarily have to have 100% signal strength. In fact, anything between, say, 30 and 70 or 80% is just fine. So no need to freak out if your signal strength is 30 or 40%. You're still getting a good reading. And signal cutoff, again, if you're having some issues with getting a strong signal, we can tweak that a little bit so that at a certain point, it just doesn't even notice that there's anything going on. And that's what that's all about. So I apologize for showing you the up arrow there. That should have been the down arrow. When we hit the left arrow button, this is where all our logging information is. On the permanent unit, you have 26 million data points that you can collect. On our portable unit, it's about 300,000. Either way, you're never going to run out of memory. But let's say you've got one of our devices out in the field. It's been a year since you've downloaded any data. All you have to do to download 1 year's worth of data is stick the USB into the slot, and it will automatically download a full year of data for you. But let's say, hey, I just want to see what's going on in the last 90 days. You can dial that in as well. I just want to know what happened in the last 24 hours. Well, look at this. When you hit the left arrow button, it's giving you information over the last 24 hours. So this is kind of a real-time snapshot of what your unit's been doing over the last day or so. That's by hitting the left arrow button. So where a lot of the magic happens is when you hit the right arrow button and you go into the settings. So when you go into the settings, you'll see a kind of a tree of information. You'll see a little caret. If you look on the screen right now where it says mode, you see a little caret next to that. And you basically just use the up and down arrow buttons to get to where you want to be. And then when you find something you want to change, you hit the right arrow button, you make the change, you hit the check arrow button, and that's all there is to it. Now, I'm not going to go through each one of these unit and mode setups. I'll kind of let you look as we're going through it, but this is where you would set up, say, instead of flow, maybe you want to read velocity. Instead of US gallons, maybe you want to read liters. The multiplier, let's say that you're in a situation where you're reading millions of gallons of water a day versus a couple thousand gallons of water a day. That's where you can go in and make those changes. And then decimals, if you want to read 100, hundreds, tenths, or hundredths, that's where you can go in and make that change as well. So let's take a little bit more of a look at the settings. The calibration settings are where you would go. Let's say that you've got this hooked into your PLC or your SCADA system. You want to set a minimum flow and a maximum flow. This is where you would do that. And it's really important, and we're finding this out more and more every day as we talk to customers. Make sure that when you're setting up the 4 to 20s, that they align with the 4 to 20s in your PLC. So 4 is generally always going to be 0, but the 20 is really important, because if your PLC is set up for a max 20 milliamps of, let's use this as an example. It's set up at 500 gallons a minute, but you go into our settings and you only set it at 400 gallons a minute, you're going to have some issues there. They have to line up. Otherwise, you're not going to see the true reading. And what's going to happen? You're going to think it's the equipment's fault. So keep that in mind if you are hooking this up and outputting 4 to 20. It's actually pretty important. So everything that I tell you right now is kind of gravy, except for the most important setting on this device. If you go down to the very bottom where it says cal constant, and then go up 1 to the pipe ID. If you can set your pipe ID accurately by using our pipe chart or your own pipe chart, this device will work properly for you, assuming you have the proper amount of straight run, which is 10 upstream pipe diameters and 5 downstream pipe diameters. If everything else is forgotten, If you can just go into calibration and get the proper inside pipe diameter, you can run this device. That's what makes it so cool. All this other stuff is just window dressing, but that's the most important thing. So make sure you have an accurate inside pipe diameter. So continuing along into the setup, we're talking about things like damping, pipe ID, which we, again, in fact, I even have a star on it on this slide to show you how important it is. There are other settings that, they are important depending on how you're setting up the unit, but nothing is more important than that inside pipe diameter. The cal constant will generally remain the same. If you need to mess with the cal constant, it's usually a good idea to call us first. It's basically set up for, for water as a liquid, but if you need to change anything, we've got charts that can help you do that. So special functions, you want to change the language, you want to change how long the backlight stays on, you want to change the password. The other really cool thing about this device that people don't know, as if there weren't enough cool things about it, is we can measure reverse flow as well. So if you have an application where your water's running one direction and then there's backflow and now it's running another direction, as long as it's full, we can capture all that. If you go in and where it says reverse flow there, you hit yes. The other really neat thing that's new to our 6.1 unit is we now have the ability to capture waveforms. So in the past, if you were having issues with your Doppler meter, our general response would be, oh, why don't you send it in? We're going to have to take a peek at it. So that means you'd either have to rent one or borrow one, or you'd have to be without one for a while. The way the waveform feature works and the parameter feature works, you can stick a thumb drive in, go into special functions, record that information, send us the file, and I'd say 8 times out of 10, just by looking at that waveform or that parameter form, we can tell you, hey, it's our fault, there's an equipment issue, or you know what, this particular area where you have this set up may not be the best spot. Maybe we need to try a couple of other things. That's revolutionary for us because it used to take sometimes weeks to get those units back into the hands of the people after we checked it out. Now it can take less than a day depending on when you reach out to us. So that's a really cool feature about this. The last thing that I would say about special functions is when you go into settings, the first thing you see before you get into the settings is a password. The password is 0000. I would never change that password because what happens, it's almost like when you put the password into your iPhone, is if that person moves on or retires or whatever and doesn't tell somebody the password and you can't figure it out, you can't get into the settings and there's very little that we can do for you. So make sure that you either commit that password to memory or just keep it at 0000 and you can avoid a lot of those issues. We talked about capturing the waveform, again, getting a little bit ahead of myself there, but this is what it would look like as a menu item itself. So you set it up, you put capture waveform instead of no, you would put yes there, you'd put a USB stick in, it would say on or collecting. It does not take that long to do it. It tells you when it's done, you pull the stick out and you either send us the stick or just download the data from the stick and send it to us. I touched on this very briefly about midway through the presentation. I really have to stress this. We talk about how great the Doppler is and how it can work on pipes from 2 inches to 70 inches, sometimes even larger than 70 inches. But in order for this thing to work properly, you have to have it set up in the right area. That means we require 10 pipe diameters upstream and 5 pipe diameters downstream. Very, very similar to what you would probably have to do with any type of an inline meter as well. We need to have linear flow as that water is passing over the sensor, which you have attached to the outside of the pipe. If that water is swirling or making an eddy or doing anything other than just moving very smoothly, it's going to corrupt that reading. So as you're looking around for, is this going to work? Think about things like elbows and 90s and T's and valves and just making sure you've got enough straight run. If you don't, you are going to run into problems. And again, it might be a situation where you say, geez, It's the equipment. Well, you know what? It's not the equipment. It's the application. So when you talk to people like myself or our sales applications engineers, we're going to ask you about straight run, and you have to be honest with us. You don't want to try to, well, I know it's not 10 and 5, it's more like 7 and 2, but maybe I can get it to work anyway. If it's not the right in terms of the proper length, if it's not the proper length, you're going to have issues. And again, you're going to think, oh, it's this equipment, and actually it's not. It's the application. The other thing I would recommend with the sensor is don't put the sensor on the top of the pipe, because if that pipe is just a smidge empty, or you got a lot of air bubbles running through there and it's maybe 99% full or 99.5% full, you just want to make sure. I generally put it at about 3 o'clock. You can sometimes have issues with a sensor when you put it on the top of the pipe. So I would recommend you put it on the side of the pipe, and it can go vertical or horizontal. We actually love vertical pipes, especially when they're full. The Doppler seems to work very, very well with vertical pipes. So I just wanted to kind of stress that before we get into our Q&A, and that is you have to have the right amount of straight run. So with that, I see there are already some questions in the chat. I'm going to go ahead and address those questions as best I can. If you have a question based on anything that you just saw in our very short presentation, now would be a good time to either enter the chat and ask your question or go into the Q&A and ask your question. So I'm going to hop on here real quick, go into the chat. The question is, does it transfer just one day or from when it was turned on? So the answer to that is, when you're transferring that logging data, is you can determine how much data you want to download. On the 24-hour log, it's going to be the last 24 hours, but you can go in there and you can tell it, I want to download for the last 90 days, 120 days, for the last year. And even if you're downloading data for a year, it doesn't take that long. So you don't feel like you're going to be stuck out there for an hour and a half waiting to download that data. So that was actually one question formed as two questions. So that's all the questions I have from the chat. Let me see if I've got anything in the Q&A. I do not. Okay. Now, granted, I admit that I'm a fabulous presenter, and when I give the information, I feel like I do it succinctly and fairly perfectly. But we do have time for more questions. If I did not answer a question, if you saw something during that presentation that you don't quite understand, I'll just stay here for another minute or so and kind of hang out and see if there are any more questions. And if there's not, we will end our presentation and hope that you guys got something out of it. But like I say, I'll just kind of hang here for a minute or two. I'm not going to sing. I'm not going to tell any jokes. I'll remain fairly quiet, and we'll just give it another minute or two. Oh, here's a question. Can it also totalize reverse flow? Yes, it can. So again, you have to make sure that you have that setting on that it lets it know that you are interested in catching reverse flow, and then it can do that. Absolutely. All right, I thought I saw something else in the chat. Oh, okay, that was just thank you. Very good. All right, I'll give it another 30 seconds. If I had a drum roll or something, this is probably where I would do that. But those folks that are still on the line, if you don't have any questions, you are free to go. But again, I really, really appreciate everybody's time. Hopefully this helps. If you need more information, obviously you can reach out to Pulsar Measurement. You can reach out to our reps. You can reach out to your individual regional sales manager. All of us can help you out. Let's see if here's a question. Oh, my screen. Oh, well, for some reason, my chat has disappeared on me. So I guess with that, everyone, I'm going to go ahead and say goodbye for now. If you have any questions, you can send them back to me, send them to your RSM, send Pulsar Measurement. But again, thank you for your time, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the V-Fair.